Hello all, welcome to AWS tutorials. My name is Kastro Kiran. In the last video, we have understood what does it mean by EC2 instance, what are the different states of an EC2 instance, and also we have seen how billing is going to happen when we are working with the EC2 instances in the AWS cloud. In this video, we are going to talk about two important concepts which are acting as a fundamental learnings in order to work with the EC2 service. The first concept that we are going to talk is known as instance types. We will see what are the different types of instances that we have and what type of instances are suitable for what kind of activities. And then we'll be talking about what are the different families of instances that we have. So these are the two things that we are going to focus in this video on a large scale. But before talking about this one, let's understand what is meant by an instance family and what is meant by an instance type. To explain this concept, I'm going to take a scenario with the help of working with bikes. Let's say currently you are seeing different bikes on the screen. Now, all these are collectively called as a bike category only, but we have different types of bikes based upon the use case scenario. Now, let's look into the difference between instance family and an instance type. The first two bikes that you are seeing on the left side of the screen, they are actually the racing bikes. So we know we have the racing bikes where the racing bikes are having certain limitations that you cannot use these racing bikes wherever you want. It has a specific purpose. These racing bikes have a specific purpose. And then comes the next two bikes, something like Activa or Hero Scooty, like these are the bikes. And these are the bikes that are most commonly used by, let's say, some elder people or the female persons. So these are some bikes which are most commonly used by a specific group of people. And then comes the last two bikes where most of the employees or the middle class people will be using these kind of bikes. And here, what are the categories of all these things? All these are collectively called as bikes only. But each type of bike is having its own specific requirement and its own specific purpose. Similarly, assume that all these bikes are your EC2 instances. So here in instances also, we have different types of instances. Let's say the first two bikes, that is racing bikes, I'm going to call them as a specific type of instance. The next two bikes, such as the Scooty and Activa, I'm going to call them as, again, one more type of instance. The next two bikes, I'm going to call them as another type of instance. So what is happening here? The configuration between the racing bikes and the other type of bike is different. So racing bikes have a specific purpose. The other bikes are serving the other types of purposes. Now, with this scenario, let's understand what does it mean by an instance family. Instance family is something which is a broader category that groups together instance types with similar categories. Now, if you observe, the first two are racing bikes. So I'm going to group them as a single category. That means these two belongs to one family. Okay, though they are all bikes, so these two bikes belongs to racing family. And the next two bikes belongs to some other family. The next two bikes belongs to some other family. That's called as an instance family. So this is a broader category that groups together instance type with similar characteristics. That is important, similar characteristics. So to keep it in a scenario-based thing, imagine it like a collection of bikes all designed for a specific purpose. The first two bikes that you see on the screen, they belong to racing category. The second two bikes that you see on the screen, they belongs to, let's say, elderly people or mostly ladies will be riding these kind of bikes. And the next two bikes are the last two bikes, which are most commonly used based on the mileage purposes. So here, the purpose of each category of the bike is different. So this is called as an instance family. So instance family is something where you are going to group all types of instances based upon their characteristics. Assume that the first two are one type of instances. The second two are another type of instances. The next two are another type of instance families. So this is called as an instance family. And the next one is known as instance type. Instance type is nothing but which have a specific configuration. Okay, within the same instance family, they have a specific configuration. Now assume that the first racing bike belongs to Yamaha company. The second bike belongs to Honda company. So like this, what is happening? They all are racing bikes only. but from which company or who is manufacturing these bikes, that makes the difference. So similarly, instance type is something, this is a specific virtual machine configuration. VM means virtual machine. So this is a specific virtual machine configuration within the same instance family. Within the same racing bikes, you might have Suzuki bikes, you might have Honda bikes, you might have Kawasaki bikes, you might have BMW bikes. So within the same instance family, there will be multiple people who will be manufacturing these bikes based upon the specific configuration, such as the CPU, the memory, the storage, networking capacity. So like this, the instance type will be there. So to keep it in this scenario of example, think of it as a particular model of the bike within the family. So something like, let's say the first bike belongs to Suzuki family. The second bike belongs to Honda family. The third bike might be belonging to Kawasaki family. The fourth bike might be belonging to BMW family. So within the same category, the bikes must be coming from different companies. Similarly, instance type is nothing but within the same instance family. Okay, within the same instance family, the instance type might be changing based upon the configuration that might be having. Some instances might be having high amounts of CPUs. Some instances might be having high amounts of memory. Some instances might be having low amounts of storage capacity. So based upon our requirement, we are going to choose a specific instance family, and inside that instance family, we are also going to select a specific instance type. So this is the simple difference between an instance family and an instance type. Now let's see what are the different families of instances that we have. On a large scale, we have 6 to 7 different instance families that we have. The first one is known as general purpose instances or general purpose instance families. So usually we call them as general purpose instances. Now, why these general purpose instances are used? They are having a balanced computing activity, balanced memory, balanced storage capacity. And these are mostly suitable for web servers, development environment, and similar basic kind of works like general purpose works. Let's say you are practicing on EC2 instance. So in that case, you are going to use the general purpose instances. Why? Because they have limited capacities where it is sufficient enough to handle the workloads. And these kind of instances are known as general purpose instances. And these general purpose instances will have a balanced computing capacity, memory capacity, and storage capacity. Now, what does it mean by AMT? These are actually the categories that are available in the general purpose instances, like A family, M family, T family. Like that, we have different types of families, which I'll be showing you in some time with respect to the AWS documentation about all of these families. But let me just categorize what are the different families that we have. The first type of family is known as general purpose instances. The second type of instance family is known as compute optimized instances. All the compute optimized based instances will be having a family category as C. They will be representing with a capital letter C. Now, these compute optimized instances will have high processing power with moderate memory, not too less memory, not too high memory. With a moderate memory, their processing power will be very much high. And these are most likely be useful when you are working with scientific simulations or batch processing. Suppose, let's say, you are working with some machine learning algorithms. You want to do something like regression analysis or random forest algorithm analysis. So in these cases, you need high compute based instances. So in that case, you can use compute optimized instances. So the compute optimized instances will have moderate memory, but their processing will be very fast. That's called as a compute optimized instances. And the next one is known as memory optimized instances. Memory optimized instances are something which has a large amount of capacity with respect to the memory terminology. So these are basically be categorized with respect to R and X. So whenever you see an instance that is going to start with R or X, they're all belongs to memory optimized instance family. And the next type of family is based on storage optimized. Storage optimized is something where, let's say, you want to store some petabytes of data. Let's say not just terabytes, petabytes of data. Let's say some 10 petabytes or 100 petabytes of data. So let's say you are working as a data science engineer. Now, when you are working as a data science engineer, you need too much of data to be stored inside an EC2 instance. So in those cases, when you have huge amounts of data sets, if you want to store those huge amounts of data sets, you are going to use the storage optimized instances. These storage optimized instances are again subdivided into three categories. One is starting with D, the other one is starting with I, and the other one is starting with S. And the next type of instance family is known as accelerated computing. Now you can see here, the second one is compute optimized, and the next one is, the fifth one is accelerated computing. Now, what is the difference between compute optimized and accelerated computing? In accelerated computing, the processing will be much higher than when you compare with the compute optimized. And these accelerated computing instances are mostly be used for machine learning algorithms or graphic processing, such as, let's say, you are editing for a 3D based movie or you are editing a cartoon based movie. In those cases, you need high amounts of graphic cards or high amounts of video encoding is required. So in these cases, we'll be using the accelerated computing based instance families. And these accelerated computing based instance families will be having a categories of P, G, and F. And then the next type is known as high performance computing. These high performance computing instances are mostly be useful when the workloads are having a huge amount of workloads. Let's say you're working with huge amounts of data sets, like a data scientist or a machine learning algorithm scientist or a machine learning engineer, artificial intelligence based. So in those cases, you are going to use this kind of instance family, which is known as high performance computing based instance family. All the high performance based computing instance families are represented with capital H. And the last type of instance family is known as a previous generation. These are basically the older instance types where we are not going to use these kind of instances, and they are also cost effective for less demanding applications. Again, these are not something that are most commonly used in the real-time scenarios. So no need to bother about this particular thing called previous generation instances. But just have an idea that these previous generation instances are basically the cost effective one. You don't have to pay too much of amount in order to work with previous generation instances. So these are the 7 different families of instances that we have: general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, accelerated computing, high performance computing, and previous generation. Previous generation is something which we are not going to bother much because they are outdated and they are older instance families. But one advantage of working with previous generation is they're cost effective. Again, these are something which are not used in the real-time scenarios. Rest of the 6 are that you are seeing on the screen, they are most commonly used based upon the requirement that the company is having or the project might be having. Right. Now, let's say you have different families of instances. Now, how to choose the instance families or how to choose a specific type of instance in a specific instance family. Now, in order to choose an instance type, we are going to look after 4 major important elements. The first one is known as the CPU requirement. How much speed of CPU capacity that you need, or how much processing power does your application need, or how much processing power does your website need. So based upon this, we are going to select the instance type. This is first selection criteria. The next one is based on memory requirement. How much RAM is required in order to conduct the smooth flow of any kind of work or any kind of operations. That's the second selection criteria. And the third one is based on the storage requirement. How much amount of storage capacity is required for your instance? That's the storage space. And the last one is based on cost. How much you are willing to spend on a specific instance type which belongs to a specific instance family. So here, cost is also one of the important things where companies will be looking for. So based on these 4 categories or the criteria, we are going to select the instance type according to the requirement of the project or according to the requirement of the client. These 4 plays an important role in choosing the specific type of an instance. Now, let us see what are the different types of instances that we have. So far, we have seen the different families of instances. Now, in each family, we have different instance types. So let us see what are the different instance types that we have. So to explain you this particular thing, I am going to the AWS documentation where I'll be sharing the link of this particular instance type families and instance type in the description of this video. If you want more details about the instance type, you can have a look into the link that I am providing in the description of this video. So let us go to the AWS documentation and let's verify what are the different types of instances that we have. And also we will see how these instances are going to serve the purpose of our requirements. So currently I am there in the AWS documentation. The same URL I'll also be providing you in the description of this video. So you can have a look into that particular link to know more about the EC2 instance type and families. So as I was telling, we have 7 different families of instances. You can see the first one is general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, accelerated computing, storage optimized, and HPC optimized. So these are on a large scale 6 different types of instance families. But apart from these 6, we also have the other one, which is previous generation. Again, no need to bother about the previous generation instances. Those are completely outdated and nobody is going to use those previous generation instances in the real-time scenarios. Now let's see the first type of instance family, which is known as general purpose instance. So as I was telling, general purpose instances provide a balance of compute, memory, and networking resources for different types of workloads. As I was mentioning, the general purpose instances are going to start with either M or T. You can see M7G, M7I. If you want to know the specific configuration of each type of instance, see, this is an instance family. General purpose is an instance family. In the instance family, you have different types of instances. Assume that this is one category of a bike. Let's say this is a racing bike. In the racing bikes, you have different manufacturers of racing bikes, right? Let's say Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, BMW. These are instance types. So you can see M7G is one instance type in the general purpose family. M7I is one instance type. M7I-Flex is one instance type. So like this, you can see the different features of all the instance types that you have. So if you scroll down, you can see the instance size. What is the size of the instance? How many CPUs you are going to get? vCPUs means how many CPUs you are going to get, how much memory you are going to get with each instance type, what is the storage capacity that also you are going to get, and the network capacity with respect to GBPS they are giving, and EBS capacity also. EBS means elastic block storage. So these are the different categories of the instances under the general purpose instance family. So if you want to know more details about this one, you can just click on specific instance type and you can see the details of all these ones. Now again in T3, let's say you are selecting T3. In T3, again, you have the T3. Let's say you have a Honda based racing bike. In the Honda based racing bike, again, you will have based upon your requirement. Let's say your capacity, the bike capacity should be touching at least 200 kilometers per hour. The another bike might be touching in the same company itself. The another bike might be touching a maximum of 150 kilometers per hour. So within the same instance type, again, you have different configured instances. You can see T3.nano is giving you 2 CPUs with 6 CPU credit hours and with 0.5 GB of storage capacity. But whereas if you see T3.small, it is also giving you 2 CPUs. But if you compare with CPU credits of T3.nano, it is having 6. But whereas T3.small is giving us 24 CPU credits per hour. And memory also, it is giving 0.5 GB on. But whereas the T3.small is giving us 2 GB of capacity. So like this, in each category also, there are multiple types of instances that we have. You can click on any one and you can get the details of each one of these categories. Like this, you can look into general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, and then accelerated computing, storage optimized, HPC optimized. Like this, you have different types of instance families, and in each instance family, you have the instance type, and again in each instance type, you have differently configured instances. According to your requirement, you are going to select most commonly based upon the requirement of the project. Now, in general, as an AWS beginner or as an AWS learner, if you are practicing, I would always suggest you to use the general purpose instances, especially T2.micro is also. So I'll be using different types of instances over a period of time throughout this EC2 discussion. Right. So these are the different families of instances. Now let's see what does it mean by T2.nano. So what does it mean by T? What is 2? What is dot representing? What is this nano? And here you can also see T2 dot X into large. So what does all these things represent? So let us decode the instance code here. This is basically called as an instance code. Okay. So for a particular instance, what type of instance you are launching? Let's say you are launching T2.x large. What does it actually represent? So let us decode this particular instance code. So let us decode the EC2 instance type. So to explain this, I'm going to take a simple example of a particular type of instance. Let's say I have the instance as C5A dot 8 times of large, or you can also call it as 8x large. So let's see what does C represents, what does 5 represents, what does A represents, and what does 8 times large represent. The first one is C. C is basically the family type. What does C represents? Compute optimized instances. So C is basically representing the family type. The first character that you see is belonging to the family. Which family type the instance belongs to? So C belongs to compute optimized. So it's a family type. C belongs to compute optimized family instance. And the number 5 represents which generation of instance it is, whether it is a second generation, third generation, fifth generation, 10th generation, seventh generation. So the number represents the generation of the instance. So the more the generation, the more advanced it is. So fifth generation instance, 10th generation instance, like this, right? And the next one, A represents the processor type. So usually we have two types of processor. The first one is known as AMD processor, and the second one is known as Intel processor. Apart from these two, we also have another type of processor, which is known as a graviton processor. So when you see A, it represents AMD processor. Instead of A, if you have seen C5I, then that represents Intel-based processor. Instead of I, if you see C5G, that means it's a graviton-based processor. So here you have three types of processors in general that is provided by AWS Cloud. First one is A, the second one is I, third one is G. A represents AMD processor, I represents Intel processor, G represents Graviton processor. Sometimes D will also be there, which represents instance data store or instance store or instance data store, you can say. So these D type of processor types are very less available, but most commonly we'll be having either A or I or G, that is AMD processor or Intel processor or Graviton processor. If you take your laptop also, your laptop might also be most commonly belonging to the Intel core processor like i5, i7, i3, like this. So here also for an instance, you will have the processor type. And the next one is 8 times of large, dot 8x large. So this 8x large represents the instance size, how much core you are getting, how much RAM you are getting. That's called as 8 times large. Sometimes you might also see 2 times large. Then that represents 2 times large of instance capacity. So that actually represents the core and RAM of the instance. Okay, so this is how you can decode the instance type. Let me tell you another example that. So let's say here you have one more type of instance, which is known as a T2.micro, which we most commonly use when we are practicing with AWS EC2 service. Now, what does T represents? T represents the instance type. What does this number represent? Number represents it's an instance generation. Now here you can see there is nothing called A or I or G. What does it mean? If you have A, it's an AMD processor. If you have I, it's a Intel based processor. If you have G, it's a Graviton based processor. If you don't see anything, then that means it will be having no type of processor. Okay, it will not be having no type of processor. And these things are something which are not used in the real-time scenarios because they will not have high processing speed. So they'll be used mostly for practice case scenarios. And what does this micro represent? Micro is the size of the instance. Sometimes you might have 8 times large or just micro or nano or medium, large, X large, 2 times large, 4 times large, 8 times large. Like this, you'll be having the instance size. So this is how you can decode an instance type. The first character that you see is the family type. The second, the number that you see is an instance generation. If you see A or I or G that represents the processor type. If you see the last one as 8 times large, micro, nano, medium, these are all represents the instance sizes, which typically represents the core and RAM of the instance. So this is how you can decode the instance. So to keep it in a nutshell, in this video, we have understood what is meant by an instance type, what is meant by an instance families, and we have also seen what are the different instance families that we have, and we have also understood what are the different types of instances that are available in each instance family also. In the next video, we are going to talk about another important concept that is available in the EC2 service. Thank you.